You lost all our inheritance? How could you do this? That money was ours too.
Michael's voice echoed through the living room of the Greenwich, Connecticut mansion, while his siblings, Jennifer and David, stood there, their expressions shock and anger. Robert Harrison, the 68-year-old sitting in the leather armchair, simply watched as his 3 children, whom he hadn't seen in months, some even years, were now gathered before him. Not for love, not for longing, but for money. And that moment would change everything between them. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. And Robert was about to teach them the greatest lesson of their lives. So subscribe to the channel, comment where you're watching from, and let's get to the story. Robert Harrison had always been a successful man. He started from scratch, built a real estate empire worth over $50 million, and raised 3 children practically alone after his wife, Margaret, died of cancer 15 years ago. He remembered every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every meeting he skipped to be at graduations, soccer games, and piano recitals. He loved those 3 with everything he had. Robert grew up poor, very poor, the son of a mechanic and a seamstress in Newark, New Jersey. He knew what it was like to go hungry, what it was like to wear his cousin's hand-me-downs, what it was like to work from the age of 12 to help out at home. When he was 17, his father died in a car accident, and the family nearly lost everything. That's when Robert promised himself he would be different. He would build something. He would give a better life to the family he would one day have. And he did. He worked as a bricklayer's assistant, then as a real estate salesman. And at 28, he opened his own company. It was difficult at first. Very difficult. He would take on any client, any property, any deal. He worked weekends, holidays, and late nights. But slowly he grew. He bought his first building at 32. By 35, he had a team. By 40, he was one of the most respected names in Connecticut real estate. He met Margaret at a mutual friend's wedding. She was an English teacher, brunette, with brown eyes and a smile that lit up any room. Robert fell in love at first sight. They married 6 months later, and they were truly happy. They built a life together, had children, and bought the mansion in Greenwich. Margaret was the family's foundation. She knew how to balance everything. When Robert worked too hard, she pulled him back. When the children needed attention, she was there. She was the heart of the home. Michael was born in 1983, a smart, curious boy always asking questions. Robert saw a lot of himself in his eldest son, that desire to conquer the world. Jennifer arrived in 1986, sensitive, artistic, always drawing or writing stories. And David in 1990, the youngest, the funny one, the one who made everyone laugh. Robert loved all 3 in different ways, but with the same intensity. But in 2010, everything changed. Margaret began to feel pain, severe pain. They ran tests. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lived 8, and they were the most painful 8 months of Robert's life. He watched the woman he loved waste away, lose her hair, lose her strength, lose her life, and he could do nothing. Nothing. All the money in the world couldn't save her. Margaret died in December, a week before Christmas, and something died in Robert too. He kept working because that's what he knew how to do. But the house felt empty. The children, then 27, 24, and 20, were making their own lives. Michael was already living in Los Angeles. Jennifer had just gotten married. David was finishing college. They came to the funeral, stayed a few days, and then left. And Robert understood. They had their own lives. It was natural, but as the years passed, the distance only grew. Michael called from time to time, always talking about some new project, some crazy idea that needed funding. Robert always helped, always, because he believed in his son, or at least he wanted to believe. Jennifer called more, especially after she had her own children, twin boys. But visits were rare. She always had an excuse. New York traffic, her husband's commitments, the kids were sick. Robert would visit her, but he felt out of place in that cold, modern apartment where everything was white and nothing was allowed to be touched. David was Robert's biggest worry. After college, he worked for a year at his father's company but quit. He said it wasn't for him, that he wanted to enjoy life. Robert didn't quite understand, but he didn't want to force it. He gave his son money to buy an apartment in Miami, thinking it was a phase that he would mature. But David only sank deeper. Parties, drinking, a different girlfriend every month. Robert tried to talk, but David always cut him off. "Relax, Dad, everything's under control." But it wasn't, and Robert found himself alone. In the 6-bedroom mansion with a heated pool, a garden that cost a fortune to maintain, a 3-car garage but no company. He hired a maid, Consuela, a 55-year-old Mexican woman who came 3 times a week. She was kind, made good food, kept everything clean. But it wasn't family. It wasn't the same. Robert tried to maintain his routine. He woke up early, went to the office, and ran the company. But his heart wasn't in it anymore. He had competent managers. The company practically ran itself. He could sell. He could retire, but why? To stay home alone? So he continued, more out of habit than desire. On Sunday afternoons, Robert went to church. Not that he was very religious before. Margaret was the one who took the family. But after she died, he started going. He needed something, some kind of comfort, some kind of answer. He always sat in the same pew in the back and listened to the pastor talk about faith, hope, and love. And Robert wondered where all of that belonged in his life. It was on one of those Sunday afternoons after Mass that Robert met Pastor Edwin, a black man in his 50s with gray hair and a warm smile. They began talking. Edwin asked about his life, about his family, and Robert, perhaps for the first time in years, was honest. He spoke about his loneliness, his distant children, his sense of having failed somewhere. "Did you give them everything?" Edwin asked. "Everything. Every penny I could give." Edwin shook his head. "And you gave it to me?" Robert was silent. "Money is easy to give, Robert," Edwin continued. "Time is what's hard. Presence is what's hard. And if you gave everything but that, then it makes sense that they only value what you gave." Those words echoed in Robert's head for weeks. He knew Edwin was right. He'd given everything except himself. But it was too late to change that now, or was it? That's when the idea began to take shape. A crazy idea, risky, but perhaps necessary. Robert began to think, what if he lost everything? What if his children thought he was broke? How would they react? Would they come out of love? Out of concern? Or would they simply ignore him, since there was nothing left to gain? He needed to know. He spent weeks planning. He talked to Edwin about the idea, and the pastor, though hesitant, understood. "Be careful, Robert. The truth sometimes hurts more than we expect. I know. But I'd rather know the painful truth than live a comfortable lie." Robert called his lawyer, Thomas Brennan. They had known each other for 30 years. Thomas had helped Robert build his empire, handling all the contracts, wills, and investments. He was more than a lawyer. He was a friend. When Robert explained the plan, Thomas was shocked. "You want me to lie to your children?" "Robert, this could blow up in your face." "I know the risk, Tom, but I have to do this. I need to know if there's still family here or if it's just self-interest." Thomas sighed deeply. "Okay, I'll help you. But when this goes wrong, don't say I didn't warn you." They pieced together the story. Robert had invested heavily in a real estate development project in Dubai, a gigantic billion-dollar project that promised absurd returns. He'd put almost everything into it. And the project had failed. Corruption, legal troubles, fraud, a total loss. Harrison Properties had to sell all its assets to cover its debts. The properties, the buildings, the investments, everything. And Robert was left with practically nothing. Only the mansion in Greenwich remained, and even that was threatened. It was a compelling story, plausible, tragic, perfect. Thomas spread the word strategically. First, he called Michael and said he needed to discuss a delicate situation involving his father. Michael, who was in Los Angeles closing a deal to produce an indie documentary, grew impatient. "Tom, I'm in the middle of a meeting. Can you make it quick?" "Your father lost everything, Michael." Silence. "What do you mean you lost everything?" "Exactly what I said. The investment in Dubai failed. The company went bankrupt. He's practically out on the street." Michael hung up the meeting and stayed glued to Thomas on the phone for 40 minutes, asking 1,000 questions. But none of them were, "How's my dad doing emotionally?" Thomas called Jennifer the next day. She answered while she was at the spa in Manhattan getting her nails done. "Thomas, honey, what a surprise." "Jennifer, I need to tell you something about your father." "Is he okay?" "Physically, yes. Financially, no." And he told the same story. Jennifer burst into tears right there in the middle of the room. But the tears were of panic, not sadness. "What about the inheritance, Thomas?" What about the trust fund for my children? Tell me there's something saved. Thomas was blunt. There's nothing, Jennifer. It all went to cover the debts. Her crying increased. And finally, Thomas called David. He got straight to the point. David, your father lost everything. I thought you should know. David, who was on a yacht in Miami with friends, sobered up instantly. How much is left? Nothing. Nothing? Nothing. David hung up without saying goodbye. And within 48 hours, the three had already booked tickets to Connecticut. They hadn't made plans. They hadn't talked to each other. But they all came to the same conclusion. They needed to go. They needed to understand what had happened. They needed to protect what was left, if anything was left. Robert prepared the house. He asked Consuela to take the week off. He needed to do it alone. He dressed in simple clothes, jeans, and an old flannel shirt. He removed some expensive paintings from the walls and put away valuables. He wanted the house to feel emptier, sadder, more real. On Thursday morning, Michael arrived first. He rented a car at Newark Airport and drove to Greenwich. When he rang the doorbell, Robert waited a few seconds before opening it. He wanted to see the expression on his son's face. Michael looked different. Older, of course. His hair was starting to gray at the sides and there were a few wrinkles around his eyes. He wore glasses now. But what Robert really noticed was the tension in his face. The clenched jaw. The worried eyes. Hi, son. Dad? Michael walked in, looking around. Are you okay? I'm alive. Tom told me about Dubai, about everything. Is it true? Robert nodded. That's true. Michael ran his hand through his hair, something he always did when he was nervous. How could you be so naive? How could you put everything into a project halfway around the world without doing due diligence? I trusted the wrong people. Trust isn't enough, Dad. You had advisors, lawyers, consultants. How come no one warned you? Robert sat in the armchair. They warned me. I didn't listen. Michael began pacing the room, agitated. This is a disaster. Complete disaster. What now? What's the plan? There's no plan, Michael. I'll sell the house, I'll move into something smaller, I'll live off the money left over from the sale. And how much will be left? Robert shrugged. After I pay off what's still outstanding? Maybe enough to rent a small apartment. Live simply. Michael turned pale. Dad, you're 68 years old. How are you going to live on practically nothing? Many people live. But you're not many people. You're Robert Harrison. You built an empire, and I lost him. It happens, Michael was almost screaming now. It shouldn't happen. Not to you. Before Robert could respond, the doorbell rang again. It was Jennifer. She'd arrived in an Uber with 2 suitcases. When she got in and saw Michael, she ran and hugged her brother. You're already here. Thank God. She turned to her father and hugged him back, but it was a quick, almost formal hug. Dad, I came as soon as I heard. What happened? How did this happen? Before Robert could respond, Michael answered for him. He invested everything in a project in Dubai and lost it. Everything. Jennifer sat on the couch, looking dazed. Everything? But there has to be something. Some account, some separate investment. Something. There isn't, Robert said calmly. How come there isn't one? She was getting hysterical. Dad, you always said you had a fund for my children. For their education. You promised. And I had it. But I had to use it to pay off my debts. Jennifer started crying. Not the delicate kind you hear in a soap opera. It was the desperate cry of someone who's just lost something important. And Robert realized she wasn't crying for him. She was crying for the money. The doorbell rang again. David. He walked in wearing a sweatshirt and a cap, dark circles under his eyes. He looked at his 2 brothers and his father. So it's true. You really did lose everything. It's true, Robert confirmed. David gave a bitter laugh. Man, I don't believe it. I really don't believe it. The 4 of them stood in the living room, a heavy silence between them. It was Michael who broke it. Okay, let's be practical. How much is the house worth? About $3 million, maybe, Robert replied. And how much do you owe? About 2. So that leaves $1 million. Michael did the math mentally. Divided by 4. No, wait. It's yours, Dad. But $1 million isn't much to live on for the rest of your life. Especially at your age. I know. Jennifer wiped away her tears. We have to do something. There has to be a solution. The solution is for me to live with less, Robert said. It's not the end of the world. Isn't this the end of the world? David exploded. Dad, you're talking about throwing away $50 million. How can you be so calm about this? Robert looked at his youngest son. David, it's just money. Just money. Just money? David was beside himself now. Dad, this money would secure the family's future. It would secure my future. And there it was. The raw truth, undisguised, unhidden, pure and simple. Robert stood up. Your future? David, you're 35. You haven't worked in 4 years. You live off the money I give you. And you think this would last forever? You always said you'd take care of us. And I did. For 35 years. But that doesn't mean I have to bankroll your life forever. Michael tried to mediate. Dad, calm down. David, calm down. Let's all take a deep breath. But it was too late. The lid had come off the pressure cooker. Jennifer stood up. Dad, I didn't come here to fight. But you have to understand our side. We were counting on this. You always said you'd leave us something. And I was going to. But circumstances changed. Circumstances you created. Michael retorted. You made a stupid decision and now everyone pays the price. Robert felt his anger rising. He had planned this. He had prepared for this moment. But hearing his own children talk like that, as if he were just a walking safe, was more painful than he'd imagined. You want to know what I think? Robert said, his voice low but firm. I think I ruined you. I gave you everything. Everything. And in the process I raised 3 adults who don't know the value of anything, who think the world revolves around money. The world revolves around money, Dad. David shouted, wake up. No, David. Your life revolves around money. And that's my fault. Because I let it. I allowed it. I financed it. But you know what's saddest? The 3 of you are here in front of me for the first time in years. And it's not because you love me. It's not because you're worried about me. It's because the money is gone. And you're desperate to protect what's left. Silence. When was the last time you called me? Robert asked. For real. Not to ask for money. Not on my birthday, not at Christmas. Just to see how I'm doing? No one answered. I'll answer for you. Never. You never called just to talk. You never came to visit just because you missed me. Jennifer, you live 2 hours away. 2 hours. And in the last 5 years? How many times have you come to visit me? 3? 4? Jennifer lowered her head. Michael, you've been in LA for 15 years. How many times have you been back here? And every time you came back, how long did you stay? 2 days? 3? Always in a hurry? Always with an excuse? Michael looked at the floor. And you, David? Robert turned to his youngest son. You just disappeared, gone. Your mother died and you ran away. You ran away to Miami. You ran away to parties. You ran away to drinking. And I let you, because I thought you needed to process your grief in your own way. But that wasn't it. You were just running away. From everything, including me. David had tears in his eyes. Do you know what I do on weekends? Robert continued. I wake up, make coffee, read the paper alone. I make lunch, eat alone. I watch TV alone. I sleep alone. And every time the phone rings, I hope it's one of you, but it never is. It's the bank. It's the company. It's someone trying to sell me something, but it's never my kids. The room fell into absolute silence. And you know what's funniest? Robert gave a sad smile. I lose everything, and suddenly you're here, all 3 of you, on the same day, but not to support me, not to hug me, to demand, to yell, to blame me. Because deep down you don't see a father here. You see a bank that went bankrupt. Jennifer stood up, tears streaming down her face. That's not fair, Dad. Fair enough? Jennifer, when your husband cheated on you last year, who told you? I didn't know. You didn't tell me. I found out by accident when you called me asking to borrow money to hire a divorce lawyer. You didn't even tell me what was going on. You just asked for the money. Jennifer blushed. And you, Michael? When your last project failed and you got depressed, did I know? No. You called me 3 months later when you were better, asking for more money for the next project. You didn't want my support. You wanted my check. Michael clenched his fists. And David, when you got arrested for drunk driving in Miami, who got you out of jail? Who paid the bail? Who paid the lawyer? Me, and did you thank me? Did you change? No, you stayed the same. Because why change, right? Daddy's always here to clean up the mess. David turned his face away. Then don't talk to me about justice, Robert said, his voice breaking. Don't talk to me about family. Because you lost the right to speak those words a long time ago. And for the first time, Robert saw shame on the faces of all 3. Real shame. Not performative remorse, but true shame. Jennifer was the first to speak, her voice weak. "Dad, I didn't know you felt that way." "How would you know?" "You never asked." Michael swallowed. "Dad, I know I failed. I know that. But I thought you were okay. You always seemed so strong, so independent." "Strong doesn't mean I don't feel lonely, Michael. Independent doesn't mean I don't need family." David finally spoke, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry, Dad, for everything. I know I'm a shitty son. I know." Robert took a deep breath. This was what he wanted, wasn't it? To see if there was still humanity there. To see if there was still love. And he saw it. He saw it in Jennifer's eyes and Michael's slumped shoulders and David's tears. They were selfish, yes. They were spoiled, yes. But deep down, they were still his children. There was still hope. "You want to know the truth?" Robert sat down again, tired. "I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at myself. Because I'm the one who raised you this way. I'm the one who taught you that money solves everything. That money is love. And now you're here proving exactly that." The three of them were silent. "But you know what?" Robert continued. "Maybe this is the best thing that could happen. Because now, without the money, we'll find out what's really left, if there's anything left." Jennifer walked over and knelt in front of her father. "Dad, there's plenty left. There's plenty left. And I'm sorry you doubted that. It's my fault. It's our fault. But I love you. I love you. Not your money. You." And for the first time, Robert saw sincerity there. Real. Pure. Michael stepped closer as well. "Dad, I've spent my whole life trying to prove to you that I could do it. That I could succeed on my own. But the truth is, I've always needed you. Not your money, your advice. Your support. Your presence. And I'm sorry I was too proud to admit it." David couldn't speak. He just cried. And Robert stood up and hugged his youngest son tightly, like he hadn't done in years. "I messed up too," Robert said. "I worked so hard to give you everything that I forgot to give you what mattered most. My time, my presence, my heart." And there, in that room, something began to change. It wasn't an instant miracle. It wasn't a magical transformation. But it was a beginning. A real beginning. The four of them spent the rest of the day talking. Really. Michael talked about his difficult years in LA, about how he always felt like he had something to prove, about how tired he was of trying to be someone he wasn't. Jennifer confessed that her marriage was on the rocks, that she felt empty, that she'd lost herself somewhere between being a wife, a mother, and a socialite. David finally opened up about his depression, his alcohol addiction, and how he was at rock bottom and didn't know how to get out. And Robert listened. Really listened. Not as a businessman, not as a provider, but as a father. They ordered Chinese food for dinner. They sat in the living room, eating with chopsticks, laughing at old jokes, reminiscing about childhood stories. And for the first time in 15 years since Margaret died, the house felt like home again. When it was getting late, Jennifer suggested, "Dad, could we stay here for this week? Before you sell the house? To enjoy ourselves, to be together?" Robert smiled. "I'd love that." And they stayed. Michael canceled his meetings in LA. Jennifer left the kids with her husband. David simply had nothing to cancel. In the following days, they truly reconnected. They made breakfast together. They walked in the garden. They watched old movies. They played cards. They talked about everything. About their mother, about the past, about regrets, about dreams. And Robert realized something. He'd lost everything, or at least they thought he had, but he'd gained something much greater. He'd won his children back. A week later, they were in the kitchen making pancakes when Robert decided. It was time. "I have something to tell you," he said, turning off the stove. The three looked at him curiously. Robert took a deep breath. "I didn't lose the money." Total silence. "What?" Michael asked. "The money. The fortune Dubai, none of it happened. I made it all up." Jennifer's eyes widened. You lied?" "I lied. Because I needed to know. I needed to know if you still cared about me. And your initial response destroyed me. But it showed me the truth. And it gave me the chance to fix what I had broken." David gave an incredulous laugh. "Man, you're crazy." "Maybe, but it worked." Michael shook his head, but he was smiling. "I should be mad, but I'm not. Because you were right. We needed that shock, that lesson." Jennifer hugged her father. I love you, Dad, with or without money. I know. Now I know. David looked at his brothers, then at his father. So, we went through all this whole emotional roller coaster. Because of a test? It wasn't just a test, David, it was a lesson for you. And for me. And there, in that kitchen, with the smell of pancakes in the air, the four Harrisons finally understood what really mattered. It wasn't the mansion. It wasn't the cars. It wasn't the bank account. It was that moment. Try again and continue. It was being together. It was laughing, crying, hugging. It was family. But the story didn't end there. Because the truth is, real change takes time. And Robert knew this. Over the next few months, they worked to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks. There were moments of tension. There were days when it seemed like they would slip back into their old patterns. But this time, everyone was committed. Michael returned to Los Angeles, but now he called his father 3 times a week. Not to ask for money, just to talk, to tell him about his day, to hear about his father's day. And twice a month, he'd fly out and spend the weekend in Greenwich. Sometimes he'd take work with him, but he always made time to be with Robert. They began a ritual. Every Friday night, when Michael was in town, they'd go to dinner at a small Italian restaurant Margaret loved. And there, over pasta and wine, they'd talk about life, dreams, and regrets. Michael also started working for real. Not on fancy projects that never got off the ground, but on something solid. He joined a reputable production company in LA and began producing real documentaries. Documentaries about real people, real stories. And for the first time, he felt he was doing something that mattered. Something his mother would be proud of. Jennifer also changed. She confronted the problems in her marriage. She went to couples therapy. She discovered that her husband, Richard, also felt distant. Also felt like he'd lost his wife somewhere along the way. They worked through it. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, they discovered, was the foundation of everything. Jennifer began taking her 8-year-old twins, Connor and Ethan, to visit their grandfather every week. And not just quick hour-long visits, real visits. They'd spend the afternoon there. Robert taught his grandchildren to play chess, fish in the lake near the property, and fly kites. Simple things he never had time to do with his own children. And Jennifer saw her father differently now, not as the powerful businessman, but as the loving grandfather her children adored. One afternoon, while the boys were playing in the garden, Jennifer and Robert were talking on the porch. "Dad, I never thanked you," she said. "Why?" "For having the courage to do what you did, to show us the truth. I was living on autopilot, you know? Nice house, polite kids, busy social life. But I was unhappy, deeply unhappy, and I didn't even know it. And now I know what matters. And I'm trying to be better, for myself, for Richard, for the boys, and for you." Robert took his daughter's hand. "You've always been wonderful, Jenny. You just forgot that." It was the first time in years he'd called her Jenny, her childhood nickname. And Jennifer cried, but this time with happiness. David took the longest to change. The truth is, he was in a deep hole. The depression was real. The alcoholism was real, and it wasn't going to disappear overnight just because he had an emotional revelation. But this time he had support. Robert convinced David to go to rehab, a good facility in Vermont. David resisted at first. "I'm not an alcoholic, Dad, I just drink socially." "David, you drink every day. You've been arrested. You're ruining your life. Please, let me help you. For real this time." And David accepted. He spent 3 months in the clinic. They were 3 difficult months. There were times when he almost gave up. But Robert visited every week. He took Michael and Jennifer when they could. And for the first time, David wasn't alone in the battle. When he left, he moved to Greenwich. He sold his Miami apartment, that symbol of a life that didn't make him happy, and rented a small place near his father. He started working at Harrison Properties. Not in an executive position. He started at the bottom, assistant property manager, and he took it seriously. He woke up early, worked hard, learned, and Robert saw with pride the son he always knew David could be. They started therapy together too, father and son, because Robert realized that part of David's problem stemmed from never having fully processed his mother's death. And Robert had never fully processed it either. So they did it together. They cried together. They remembered together. They healed together. In a session 6 months after David returned from rehab, he finally opened his heart. I always felt like I wasn't good enough, David confessed, tears streaming down his face. Michael was the ambitious one. Jennifer was the perfect one. And I was just the youngest. The funny one, the one who made everyone laugh but no one took seriously. David, Robert began. Let me finish, Dad. When Mom died, I felt like I lost the only person who really saw me, who understood me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I ran away. I ran away to parties, to drinking, to an empty life, because it was easier than feeling the pain. Robert hugged his son. I see you, David. I've always seen you. I just didn't know how to show you. But I love you, just the way you are, not the way you think you need to be. It was a moment of profound healing, and it marked a real turning point in David's life. Months turned into a year, and in that year, the Harrison family transformed. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but truly and profoundly. Robert changed too. He started working less. He delegated more within the company. He started taking vacations. He traveled with his kids, something he'd never done before. They went to California to visit the studios where Michael worked. They went to Vermont to ski. Even though Robert wasn't so young anymore, he tried. They even went to Mexico on a simple beach trip, just the four of them reminiscing about family vacations when they were kids. Robert also reconnected with the church. Pastor Edwin became a close friend. They had lunch together every Tuesday. And Edwin helped Robert understand something important, that it's never too late to start over. That God gives second chances, and third chances, and as many as necessary. You did a brave thing, Robert, Edwin said one Tuesday. Risking everything to save what truly matters. Not many men would have that courage. I don't know if it was courage or desperation, Robert replied, smiling. Sometimes it's the same thing. That Christmas, something magical happened. Everyone gathered at the Greenwich mansion. Not just Michael, Jennifer, and David, but also Jennifer's husband, Richard, and the twins, Michael's new girlfriend, an art teacher named Sarah, whom he had met in LA, and even a girl David was starting to date, a co-worker named Amy. The house, which for so many years had been a silent mausoleum, was full of life, full of laughter, music, and children running around. Robert prepared the turkey, something he had never done, but something Margaret always did. He followed her recipe written down in an old notebook. And when she pulled the turkey from the oven, perfect and golden, he felt she was there. Somehow Margaret was there. During dinner, Robert asked for attention. I'd like to make a toast. Everyone raised their glasses. A year ago, I was a rich but empty man. I had everything, but I had nothing. So I took a risk. I bet everything on a lie that would reveal the truth. And the truth hurt, but it also set me free. Today I look around this table and see what really matters. I see my children, my grandchildren, people I love and who love me back, truly. So I want to thank you. Thank each and every one of you for giving me a second chance. For me and for us. Michael raised his glass. To the craziest, wisest father I know. Jennifer laughed, crying. To the family, David finished. To second chances, and everyone toasted. After dinner, while the children played and the adults chatted, Robert went to his room. He opened a drawer and took out a letter. A letter Margaret had written to him shortly before she died. He had read it 1,000 times, but always found something new. Robert, my love, the letter read. If you're reading this, it's because I'm gone. And I'm so sorry for leaving you. I'm so sorry I won't be there to grow old with you, to see our grandchildren grow up, to continue our story. But I need to ask you something. Don't lose yourself in work. Don't lose yourself in money. Don't lose yourself in loneliness. Our children need you, not your money. You, your presence, your love. Promise me you'll be there for them, even when it seems they don't need you, even when it seems they don't want you, because they need you. Always have. Always will. I love you. Forever. Margaret. Robert folded the letter carefully and put it back in the drawer. I kept my promise, Maggie, he whispered. I was late. I made mistakes along the way, but I kept it. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Robert stood in the living room staring at the Christmas tree. The lights twinkled softly, reflecting off the colorful baubles, and he felt peace, truly peace, for the first time in 15 years. In the years that followed, the Harrison family continued to grow. Michael and Sarah were married in a small, beautiful ceremony in Malibu. Robert was the best man. Jennifer and Richard renewed their vows in a ceremony even more emotional than the first. David and Amy also married, in a simple ceremony at Pastor Edwin's church. And Robert cried at every wedding. He cried with joy. The twins grew up and became teenagers. Connor wanted to be an architect. Ethan wanted to be a musician, and Robert supported them both, going to soccer games, recitals, and school performances. Michael and Sarah had a daughter, a beautiful little girl named Margaret, named after the grandmother he would never know. And Robert held that little baby in his arms and promised he would be the best grandfather in the world. David and Amy also had twins, a boy and a girl. They named the boy Robert Jr., and Robert cried when he found out. "Dad, I want my son to have a role model like the one I've finally learned you are," David said. And Robert realized he had done it. He had managed to right his wrongs. He had managed to rebuild what was broken. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but it was real. Harrison Properties continued to thrive. David eventually became a partner. He had a knack for business, and with his father's support and guidance, he flourished. Michael continued making his documentaries, one of which was even nominated for an Oscar. Jennifer opened an art gallery in Manhattan, something she'd always wanted to do but never had the courage to do. And for the first time, the three children felt fulfilled. Not because of the money, but because of their purpose. Robert eventually retired for good. He handed the company over to David, promising that he would run it with integrity. And David delivered. Robert spent his days doing what he loved, spending time with his family, traveling, something he never did as a young man, and volunteering at Pastor Edwin's church, helping families in need. He also began giving talks, short talks in churches and community groups about fatherhood, family, and what truly matters in life. And his story, the story of how he lost everything to gain what truly mattered, touched hearts wherever he went. "Money is important," he said in these lectures. "I won't lie and say it isn't. We need money to live, to take care of our families, to have security. But money can't be the center. It can't be the purpose. Because at the end of your life, when you're on your deathbed, you won't want your bank statement next to you. You'll want the people you love. And if you've spent your whole life chasing money instead of cultivating relationships, you'll die rich but empty." People listened. They cried. They reflected. And many changed. Robert lived to be 87. 19 years after that day that changed everything. 19 years of a full, truly rich life surrounded by love. When he finally left, it was in peace. He slept one night and simply didn't wake up. The doctors said it was his heart. But his children knew the truth. He had lived all he needed to live. He had loved all he needed to love. He had fixed all he needed to fix. The funeral was enormous. Hundreds of people attended, friends, colleagues, families he had helped through volunteer work. But the most moving moment was when Michael, Jennifer, and David stood up to speak. Michael was the first. "My dad taught me something few fathers have the courage to teach. He taught me that it's okay to fail. It's okay to admit you're wrong. It's okay to ask for help. And most of all, that love is more important than pride. I spent years trying to prove to him that I was capable. But he never needed proof. He just needed me. And when I finally understood that, everything changed. Dad, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for having the courage to show me the truth, even when it hurt. I love you forever." Jennifer spoke next, her voice breaking. "My father was the bravest man I ever knew. Not because he built an empire, but because he had the courage to destroy everything to save what truly mattered. He taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness. That asking for forgiveness isn't shameful. That starting over is always possible. Dad, you were my hero, not because of your success, but because of your humanity. I love you, and I will miss you every day." David was the last, and he could barely speak. My dad saved me. Literally. I was drowning and he pulled me to the surface. He could have given up on me. God knows I gave him enough reasons. But he didn't. He fought for me. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And today I'm a better man, a better father, a better person because of him. Dad, I promise I'll carry on your legacy. Not the legacy of money. The legacy of love, of family, of second chances. I love you. Thank you for everything. After the funeral, the three brothers gathered at the Greenwich Mansion, the same room where years earlier Robert had revealed that he had lost everything. The same room where everything changed. He left us something, Michael said, holding up an envelope. Another test? David joked, wiping away tears. Michael opened it. It was a letter, in Robert's shaky handwriting, written shortly before he died. "My dear children," the letter said. "If you're reading this, it's because I'm gone. And that's okay. I lived a long and above all happy life. Happy because of you. I know I wasn't a perfect father. I made many mistakes, but in the end I got the only thing right that truly mattered. I loved you. And you loved me back. Truly. The fortune I leave you isn't in bank accounts or properties. Those things have their value, yes, and can make life easier for you and your children. But the true fortune I leave you is the lesson we learned together. That family is everything. That love is everything. That being present is everything. Take care of each other. Take care of your children. Be present. Don't make the same mistakes I made. You have the chance to do better from the beginning. Use that chance. And always remember you were and always will be my greatest achievement. Not the company. Not the money. You. I love you. For always, Daddy." The three embraced and cried. But they also smiled, because they knew Robert had passed away peacefully and that his legacy would live on. Not on building plaques or in bank accounts, but in their hearts. In the values they would now pass on to their own children. In the family they would continue to build. Michael looked at his brothers. "We make a pact here. We'll never stray from each other again. We'll never put money before family again. We'll continue what he started." "Deal," Jennifer said. "Deal," David finished. And they did. In the years that followed, the three remained close. Weekly dinners, family vacations, a constant presence in each other's lives and in the lives of their nieces and nephews. And when Robert's grandchildren grew up and had children of their own, the story was passed on. The story of the grandfather who lost everything to teach what truly mattered. And the lesson echoed through generations. You know, Robert Harrison's story makes me think about how many families today are broken. Not for lack of money, but for lack of presence. How many parents work so hard to provide everything for their children that they forget to provide for themselves. How many children value inheritance more than a hug. The truth is, we live in a society that teaches that success is a bank account. But true success is looking around your dinner table and seeing people who love you for who you are, not for what you have. Robert had the courage to risk everything to discover this truth. And in the process, he not only saved his family, he left a legacy worth more than any fortune. If this story touched you, if it made you reflect on your own priorities, like, comment and subscribe to the channel to continue hearing stories that truly matter. Until next time.